Call the meeting to order at 7:01. Can I have a roll call, please?
You may. Mr. Allred.
Here.
Mr. Andreessen, Mr. Fell, Mr. Hopkins.
Here.
Ms. McFarland,
Here.
Ms. Sims, and Ms. Yu.
Here.
Okay, so it looks like we have a quorum. Any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Approval of the minutes from the May 18th, 2023 regular meeting. Are there any motions or comments on the minutes from the last meeting?
I move that we send the minute for approval from May 18th, 2023.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Any changes? If not, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Do we have any communications?
We do not.
And we have no continued public hearings or unfinished business, which brings us to our new public hearing for this evening. Plan case number 2476, PUD 23, an application by Marty Smith on behalf of Carl Foundation for a residential planned unit development located south of Federal Drive and north of Dory Miller Drive and Carver Drive in the R3 single and two-family residential and R4 medium-density multiple family residential zoning districts. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Garcia.
All right. I feel like I should introduce myself. It's been a while since I've presented to Plan Commission. I'm Kevin Garcia. I'm Principal Planner and Zoning Administrator. Okay, good evening. So this is a request by Marty Smith on behalf of the Carl Foundation for preliminary approval of a residential planned unit development. This is on farmland that's north of the Carver Park neighborhood in Champaign and south of Federal Drive in Urbana. The initial phase of development for this planned unit development would include 30 small homes and a community center to provide permanent supportive housing for medically fragile and chronically homeless people. The request also includes a waiver to build fewer parking spaces than required. This request tonight is for preliminary approval of a PUD only. They would need to come back in the future for approval of a final planned unit development. So just to give a little bit of context, this location is in sort of the far northwest corner of Urbana, or the part that's northwest but still south of I-74. It's on the border of Urbana and Champaign, as you can see here. And this site, the site for this proposed planned unit development would occupy the sort of the southern half of this larger site here, and it's an 11.5-acre site. As far as we can tell, it's always been used as farmland. There's a map of current land uses. So you see this area is farmland. Again, to the south you have the Carver Park neighborhood. There to the west and to the north, and then a little bit to the southeast there are some churches. To the north there are light industrial, mostly office uses, and then there's some vacant land to the east as well. The zoning of this site is a mix. It's mostly R4, which is medium density, multiple family residential, with a small portion of it is R3, single and two family residential. The adjacent zoning, again to the north, is a light industrial area. to the east is other R4 zoned residential. And then to the south and west is in Champaign, but it's zoned for single-family homes. Now, if you look at the site plan, again, this is a tiny home community for medically fragile and chronically homeless individuals. The initial phase would include 30 homes, so those are the little squares on here are tiny homes, and then a community center, which you see kind of in the center here. And the plan includes walking paths, recreational spaces, and a gardening plot for residents' use. This development would be gated with main access coming through the community center. There would also be emergency access points on sort of the southwest and then on the southeast of the site. But aside from emergency vehicles and maintenance vehicles, there would really be no other vehicles on the site, and so folks would get around just walking on the interior. This proposed development will help fill a much-needed gap in our community. It's a collaboration between the Carl Foundation, the University of Illinois, and the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. The City of Urbana has also pledged funds from the funds that we received for the American Rescue Plan Act. The comprehensive plan identifies the future land use of this area as institutional, which this proposed use meets that designation. This planned unit development would also help meet many of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. I won't go through them all. They're detailed in the staff report on page 3, but there are over 20. And then in addition to being aligned with the comprehensive plan, the Plan Commission and City Council need to review every planned unit development with respect to 9 general goals that are outlined in section 13(3)(c) of the zoning ordinance. And we found that this proposed development is generally consistent with 7 of those 9, and then the other 2 aren't really applicable. I'll just run through those 7 really quickly, not in any detail, but just to state what they are. So the first is to promote infill development in a manner consistent with the surrounding area. The second is to promote flexibility in subdivision and development design where necessary. The third is to provide public amenities not typically promoted by the zoning ordinance. The next is to promote development that is significantly responsive to the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the comprehensive plan. The next is to provide a higher level of street and pedestrian connectivity within the development and the surrounding neighborhood in accordance with the comprehensive plan. The next one is to coordinate architectural styles, building forms, and building relationships within the development and in the surrounding neighborhood. And finally, to encourage the inclusion of a variety of public and private open space, recreational facilities, greenways, and trails not typically promoted by the zoning ordinance. So the purpose of planned unit developments is to encourage development that really goes beyond the minimum zoning and development standards of typical development. In addition, planned unit developments have to be on at least half an acre, which this site is. They also have to qualify under one of 4 criteria, those being a mixed-use development, a conservation development, infill development, or a unique development. This proposal qualifies as a unique development because it significantly responds to the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. As I stated in my opening, the request also includes a waiver for parking. The zoning ordinance requires 2 parking spaces for every house, regardless of its size or who's living there. So even tiny homes require 2 parking spaces. So in this case, the zoning ordinance would require 60 parking spaces for the 30 tiny homes, plus additional parking for the community center and for staff and visitors. Since the residents that are living here will not have vehicles, the applicant requests a waiver to reduce the amount of parking required. Staff recommend just a simple waiver, eliminating the parking requirements altogether, so that'll give the applicant that will allow them to build what they actually need on the site. I did want to mention, before I wrap up, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting on Tuesday of this week. I sent out a supplementary memo this morning detailing that meeting. I was not able to attend the whole meeting. It lasted for 2 hours. I had to get to a council meeting in the middle. But it was a well-attended meeting. There were, I counted 25 members of the public that showed up to that meeting, and that was in addition to project staff from the applicant's team, and then 2 city staff were at that meeting as well. The recommendation that staff is making in this case, well, first of all, Plan Commission has three options. You can recommend approval to the City Council, you can recommend approval with conditions, or you can recommend denial. Staff recommend a recommendation of approval with two conditions. And I apologize, I meant to add this second one to the staff memo, but neglected to put it in there. But the first is that the final development plans, when they come in, be in general conformance with the attached site plan. And then the second is that the final development plans include sidewalks that connect the development to Carver Drive. That concludes my presentation. I know the applicant's here with their team, and they can answer more questions you have about the project specifically, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Mr. Garcia. Do we have any questions for staff? Mr. Hopkins.
I want to clarify for myself, but maybe useful to other people as well. So this is a preliminary application, or application for preliminary approval,
Correct.
which we make a recommendation about, then goes to council. Then they submit a final, which we make a recommendation about, and then goes to final.
That's correct.
And all of that has to occur before a building permit is granted.
That's correct.
Okay. So one of the things that means to me is the condition about general agreement with the site plan. My impression is that this site plan is not well developed, let me put it that way. We can deal with that at a final and merely give feedback now, maybe. I mean, at this session. Am I sort of in sync with reality here?
Well, yes, and I think you could give recommendations for things, if you see things that you would like to see in a final site plan at this point. I think that would be appropriate to state. It might not be necessary to approve the preliminary plan, though.
Okay.
Other questions for staff? I have a question, just more of a clarification. So in reading the staff report, it makes it seem like the only relief from the current zoning requirements for this parcel is the elimination of the parking requirements.
Yes, that's correct.
So is the inverse of that to say that if there were not parking minimums, this development could be built under current zoning?
No. It's kind of a unique situation. So it's a series of essentially single family homes that would all be on the same lot under common ownership. and we don't have a mechanism in the zoning ordinance to allow that.
Okay. Are there, other development guidelines that, apply? Because when I look through the zoning ordinance, the closest thing that sort of makes sense for governing development with something like this is like a mobile home park, which is not to say it's a good fit, but
Yeah.
there are development standards that go along with that. Like where are the development standards coming from that are being applied to this that might relate to Mr. Hopkins' question about guidance for how the site plan, is put together?
Right. Well, I mean, since it's a planned unit development, we would look at the recommended design features for planned unit developments, and this being a preliminary application, it doesn't need to get into those details. Although the application does ask which ones an applicant intends to incorporate into the final site plan. So those are the ones in Table 13.2 in the zoning ordinance. So that's what we would be looking for.
But we don't know necessarily which of those have been addressed by the current site plan or the current proposal.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't go through and actually, do like a checklist of it because it's not really the appropriate time to do that.
Okay.
When the final one comes in, that's when we would really look and make sure that it's checking those boxes.
Okay. One other question
Yeah.
to clarify something just in my mind, but maybe this is something others have a question about as well. So the future land use map shows this as being institutional, and you said that this is aligned with that, but this is largely residential. What's the logic for how you get to seeing some consistency with that?
Yeah, well, and the applicant can sort of speak more about how the development will be run, but it's not just like a residential development with like a clubhouse or something like that. It's the community center is going to have staff that provide like wraparound services for folks who live there, who need assistance with various things. So it is, the community center in my mind is more of is like a charitable institution type use. So that aligns with the institutional future land use. So it's more, if it were just a regular residential development, it wouldn't align with that, but it's not a typical residential development.
Okay. And one other question, sorry. So in the comments from the public meeting that the applicant held, someone asked, or there was some comment made about transit accessibility. Do you know, this is not something I had a chance to look at in advance, but do you know where the closest bus stop is that people would use?
Yeah, yeah, I could have included that probably on this, maybe on this map, or one of these maps, but there is an MTD bus stop right here at the corner of Bradley and Carver Drive.
Okay.
And I know, and the applicant can speak to this more, but I know they've been in preliminary discussions with MTD on how to get some sort of service closer to this site. I mean, because folks would still have to walk probably, 4 blocks or something, which isn't that far. But and I believe they're also considering doing like private type shuttles because since their population there is medically fragile, there are going to be folks who won't be able to walk to the bus stop, so they will need other forms of transit.
Okay. Last chance. Anyone else have questions for staff? Mr. Hopkins? No? Okay. Thanks, Ms. Garcia.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so I'll briefly go over the rules for a public hearing. The petitioner or the applicant will be given a chance to address the commission first, and we may have some questions for them. And then anyone in favor will be allowed to address the commission, followed by anyone opposed. Then at the end, if needed, the petitioner can address the commission again and respond to any comments from the public. Then we'll close the public input portion, discuss, and possibly entertain a motion to vote. So at this time, I'll ask the petitioner or the applicant if they're interested in addressing the commission.
Thank you. I just want to make ourselves available for any questions you may have regarding the overall project. Just a quick overview. This is a project that's geared for a specific population.
Marty, is that mic on? I can't tell. You're also welcome to come up and sit at the table if you'd prefer.
Hot?
Yeah.
Mic's on? Okay.
Okay. I just wasn't sure.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, again, it's, this is a project really geared and targeted for a specific population. This population, as stated in your write-up, is medically fragile. They are chronically homeless. They've been on the streets for some time, for the majority of their life, and as such don't do well, and there's a gap for service for this particular population. There's been a loss of community and really a lack of services provided within the community to help them get into a housing situation. So the community center, as stated earlier, is not a clubhouse for a residential community. It is really a service center for the residents. There'll be caseworker offices there, real intense wraparound service, learning classes, learning teaching kitchen, community room, laundry services, and really just the community center is set up to serve the needs of the particular residents. The project, again, models some across the country with a number of exceptions. One, it's not just housing, it's about healthcare, because we know that healthcare is housing, and housing without healthcare and without wraparound service really doesn't get to the core needs of this population. So we've got a collaboration between Carle Health, University of Illinois, and the CCHCC, and collectively we're really bringing a product to this community unlike anything else across the country. Any questions that you may have specifically about the project, I'd be glad to address. Otherwise, I'll leave it to the public comments.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for the petitioner? Mr. Hopkins?
What entity owns the parcel of land?
Right now, the parcel of land is owned by Carle Health. It will be conveyed to the not-for-profit organization Hope Village, Inc., which has been established with the state of Illinois, but has not yet received its not-for-profit status.
And that will include the entire Tract 1 and Tract 2?
It will include just the 6-acre tract or the final platted tract for Hope Village. The balance of the land will be retained by Carle.
And there will therefore be a subdivision?
Yes.
In that case, what entity has authority over the Tract 2 and the remainder of Parcel 1, which will become a different parcel?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, one of the aspects of planning, and especially with a PUD that sits between three or among three dead-ended streets, is the relationship of the configuration of this parcel to the remainder of vacant parcels and questions of access and connectivity. And therefore, one of the major issues from my point of view about the site plan is planning. If the parcels are going to be separated and separated in ownership, and this is described as the initial phase, then I'm trying to learn how to think about Phase 2 or the remainder of parcels that are designed?
At this point, there's no plan for the remainder of the property. Oh, it does have access from Federal Drive, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Okay.
Anyone else? Questions?
Oh,
Go for it.
that one. 30 tiny homes, the number I saw was 137 homeless, the last count. How are the 30 residents chosen?
If I could, I'd like to have Claudia Lenhoff with CCHCC.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Claudia Lenhoff, and I'm the Executive Director of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, and we will be responsible for identifying the eligible individuals for the 30 homes. The point-in-time count, is that what you're referring to?
I guess so. I mean,
Yeah.
I read it, so I don't, you
Yeah.
know more about it than I do.
Well, you're correct. So our community does a point-in-time count twice a year. Point-in-time refers to a process of literally finding and trying to identify and count every single individual who is homeless in our community. We have a lot of housing opportunities, and we're getting more vouchers and things like that to help make housing available for people. We have identified a subset of the individuals who are homeless who really can't make it work through that system, and on top of that, they are medically fragile. So there's a sense of urgency for finding homes for them. So the way that we would identify the people who would qualify for this is there are two main criteria. One is a history of chronic homelessness, and also that they are medically fragile. So typically, when we're thinking about that, a lot of times we're looking at homeless individuals who are a little bit older, maybe 50 or older. And I think in that point in time count, there were 9 who were unsheltered, I believe, and then a few more who were sheltered, coming up to about 17. So that's how we were, when we decided on 30, we were looking at a previous point in time count and trying to figure out that specific subpopulation of homeless individuals.
So I interpret that to mean that 30 is likely to be adequate.
It should be adequate, but by the time it's built and with circumstances, however, I think it will be a good start, and it may be adequate because one of the other things that's happening in our community now, just as we have been recipients of an Urbana ARPA grant to help with this, many other organizations that work in housing have gotten grants as well. And so I'm hoping that our housing system will be a little bit more robust for those individuals. But one of the other issues is also that, you know, there might be more housing, but it's not all going to be accessible. And so that's one of the key features of these homes, is that they will be accessible. And if I can just give an example, right now, we at Healthcare Consumers have a client who, if Hope Village were available right now, would be a perfect client. He's a gentleman, homeless individual in his upper 50s, about my age. I'm 57. That's part of the upper age range a lot of times, unfortunately. He has stage 4 cancer. He's terminal. He's been given between 3 to 4 months up to a year if everything goes well for him. And so, you know, that's just an example of the kind of circumstance that individuals are in who we are trying to help.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. I have a question that's probably more for Marty,
Okay.
maybe. So in the record of comments from the meeting on Tuesday, it seemed like there were some comments and concerns about how accessibility and sort of integration with the surrounding neighborhood is balanced with security. I know this is early in the design of the project, but it's clear that there's gates and fencing. Can you give a little more of a sense, like what would it look like to be on Carver Street looking down at this project? Are we talking about a fence that entirely blocks off what's going on, or is it something different?
No, it'd be more of a decorative, I think we envision a decorative gated type community. There's a security issue for the residents, as well as the neighborhood, but let's also be realistic. This is a medically fragile population.
Right.
They're not going to be mobile. They're not going to be out and about a lot. And so a lot of the security measures are in place for the residents themselves. Security cameras not only will, be a crime component, but really it's more of an observation and safety net for the residents while they're on property.
Okay. And I believe there was a rendering that was in the News Gazette in an article. Is there a rendering that's done
We
so
do have
far, or-
conceptual drawings. They
Okay.
were at the neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
We'd be glad to make sure that y'all get a chance to look at it. It was
Okay.
a home and a community center and the site plan that you saw here.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because it wasn't included in our package, but it seemed like that there was something out there.
I'm not clear I understand here. There is design work beyond what we've been shown?
Yes.
Yeah, and at the neighborhood meeting, they shared some renderings of the buildings.
But we don't have a way of seeing them. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, that was the first I had seen them, and I'm not totally sure that's relevant at the preliminary planned unit development stage. So that's definitely something that would be in the final.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm asking just because we have a public that's watching this and want to give them the best sense of what the project will be like to address or allay their concerns, regardless of what preliminary versus final, that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
that's why I'm
I
asking.
got you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, that's what I saw. Okay, thanks, Marty. Okay, so at this point, we'll ask that anyone in favor of the project that it wishes to address the commission, they can come forward. If you could just state your name, and I believe there's a sign-in sheet on the table. Yeah, you're welcome to sit as well.
Of Urbana, Jennifer Putman, and I'm a graduate of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and I see my former professor here, and go to put. So I effectively turned it off. Okay. Thank you very much. I had the privilege yesterday of attending the community compact, the university community compact that Chancellor Jones and community and university convened. And I was in and by the way, our mayor, Marlin, spoke with the good news that this was coming to be, and to great approval of those in attendance. I was in the breakout session that had to do with health and well-being, and part of our exercise was to envision the community of the future. What would you like to see in 10 years, an ideal community? And there were about 25 people in the room, and what folks offered as their ideal community sounded so much like what the tiny homes offers. Things such as, oh, I wish I didn't have to go past on Green Street or somewhere in downtown and see people begging. And that makes me so uncomfortable. I wish people didn't have to be on the street but could get the care that they need. I wish there was a place where people could afford to live for minimal needs. Maybe they don't need a whole kitchen. Maybe they aren't going to cook. They just need maybe a hot plate and a microwave oven. And the more people were describing the ideal community, it sounded like what Hope Village offers. And inside, I was saying, yay. And there's an inner reason. I should have included this in my introduction of myself. I'm a member of the board of the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, and I am so proud of our organization's work toward this goal. I'm so proud of our staff. I am proud of the meeting that convened at Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church the other night. I am so proud of our employees who went door to door, passing out leaflets, introducing people to the fact that this was a possibility. You know, Professor Hopkins, this is like real planning. This is like, wow, this is really what we were taught in school back when the BURP, the Bachelor's in Urban and Regional Planning, which I think I better get out of here before Professor Hopkins says, you're gonna have to hand back that diploma, young lady, who's not so young anymore. But thank you very much for taking this up, and thank you for being our commissioners who make the well thought out decisions that it is hoped will have us living in a community that we're so proud to live in. Thank you very much for your service to the city of Urbana.
Great. Thanks for your comments. Anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the proposal?
Hi.
Welcome.
Oh. My name is Lisa Dixon, and I am a lifelong member of, I was born and reared here in Champaign and Urbana, and I was also in attendance at the Tuesday Pilgrim Baptist Church meeting, and I just wanted to say, in terms of being in favor of that, that I am most definitely not a religious person, but that I hope I am a moral person, and I do believe that the idea of doing for the least of us is the same as doing for the most of us. And I've been involved with Champaign County Healthcare Consumers for many years, and I have found that that organization always seems to have the care for the least of us in our community at the forefront of their mission. And I think that the Hope Village, the Tiny Homes Village, is a really concrete example of what we as a city and a county can do for those in our community, again, who are, quote unquote, amongst the least of us. As I listened to, because I had not heard a lot of the information, but as I listened on Tuesday to all of the planning around the Hope Village, all the security planning, all the planning in terms of having folks there who would be caseworkers for the people there, it seemed really well thought out to me. It seemed, it is obvious that we cannot meet every single possibility that may come up, but it seems to me that this is well thought out both in its intention to help those who are unhoused, but also in its intention to integrate into the community as opposed to be separate from the community. And I think that's incredibly important. You know, there's a kind of lesson we can take from many other types of villages in some of the Scandinavian countries and other places in Europe that, and even other places here in the US where these things have happened. And I would love for Champaign-Urbana, for Urbana especially, to be a leader in that area in terms of helping and working with those of us who are less fortunate in terms of housing. So I am, for what it's worth, wholeheartedly in favor of this, and as I was listening, I was inspired and was already planning on figuring out how could I be of service to that. You know, could I be someone who helps to drive people to the grocery store? Could I be someone who helps to drive people to doctor's appointments? Those sorts of things. And I think the creation of Hope Village will in some ways make it easier, not just for the folks who are members of the village, but also for those of us who want to find a way to work for our community, not just in terms of giving money, although that's always important, but also in terms of how can we be wholeheartedly members of our community and helping others out. So that's what I wanted to say in favor of the project. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your comments. Anyone else that wants to address the commission in favor of the project? All right, anyone that wants to address the commission in opposition of the project? Please come forward, state your name and sign in. Yes. Thank you.
My name is Darlene Bailey, and I have to say that I'm not 100% opposed to the project, but there are a lot of unanswered questions for me that I have deep concerns about because I understand the seriousness of this. I see these people, I ride MTD, and I interact with these people, so I understand the concern. But there are also concerns on the other end as well. And I have spoken with Marty concerning another meeting, whether it's small or large, however it be, and he's agreed. But it's just, for me, there are a lot of other issues that can arise that I think that we need to have control over before we go into this, because I have been linked as part of that community. And I don't know how that happened, but it has. So therefore, I need to know for myself and my safety where this is actually going, because there's a lot of things to untangle here. And, you know, for instance, will this only be for medical fragile people? How many stages are there? Will there be other residents that's added after a certain phase, you know? Because when I asked the question about the homeless population, it was 137, I believe, in 2021. But now I think it's 194, I was told. Okay? Out of 30 people, you still got to, potentially, because there's some you probably didn't reach. Out of 194 people, you choose 30, you still got 164 left. Someone is going to think that this person doesn't deserve it no more than I do. So you're going to have other underlying factors that's going to surface with this as time goes on. And there are many other questions that I would have, but I can eliminate them down to a few, okay? I can clump them together. But again, I would like to say that I'm not 100% opposed, but there are some questions that I feel need to be answered for me or for the community that I don't feel comfortable with right now. as living in that community and dealing with those people in the community on a day-to-day basis. There are times that I will have them cut my yard. I know these people. I ride MTD, and I understand these people. And there's a lot of other underlying factors there, too, that may not have been considered that might need to be. So after saying that, thank you so much, and please take this under consideration.
Mr. Hawkins? Thanks for your comments. You have a question?
Just, if you're willing to say, do you live in the Carver Park neighborhood?
Actually, I live on the corner of Beardsley and Carver. It's the block there between me and Carver Park. It's just right on the other side of Bradley.
Okay.
And there are a lot of accidents in that area, right there at that corner. So there are other things we need to consider.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to address the commission in opposition to the project or that has questions? Okay. Yes, if you could, please.
Evening. I live in Carver Park. I was raised in Carver Park. I live on Bethune. And for that particular area, it's not a big area. We have school buses up there. We have Amazon trucks. We have trash and God knows how much other car traffic. And for that little street to take that much traffic, it's a lot. And I don't think you're thinking clearly as far as the residents. You've got kids up there. You've got people that walk their pets, people that walk, period. And our area is the oldest African-American subdivision in Champaign. I'm not sure about Urbana, but I know Champaign. We've been up there for over 50 years. And I'm not sure why our area is always chosen, seem like right off the bat, for that type of thing. I mean, I don't see a lot of the other areas, especially for the ones that are historically known. They don't try to push this kind of thing off on people. They say, well, you know, it's historically protected. The trees even in certain areas are protected, so I don't understand why our area is always the first ones that's chosen, because a lot of people wouldn't want this in their backyard. I don't care if it's going to be gated. I don't care if it's going to be under lock and key. It's just some things people don't like in their backyard, and I'm one of those people. So, I mean, if it's a guarantee that everything would be on the up and up, and would be clear and cut and dry, I can understand it. But for right now, I'm not seeing how everything can go as smoothly as everybody thinks it's going to go, and for everything to be as clear and cut, and you all being, what I want to say, clear on everything that's going on. So I think you need to take that under consideration. My son was asking me, he said, where did the idea come from? His mama just not hearing about this. Tuesday night, they said there was 18 other choices that you all had, and it came all the way down to just one choice, Carver Park. So I'm wanting to know why Carver Park was chosen out of 17 other places that could have been chosen. And I just think you all need to reconsider this, take under consideration of what the residents in that area want, and just reconsider and think about the people that live there versus what you all want and what the money will buy and what Carl wants and you will buy. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Yeah, if you could sign here. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eldris Melinda Carr, and I live in the Dr. Ellis subdivision. And some concerns that I see, of course, we want the homeless and any vulnerable people to have housing. Who wouldn't? That's not the issue. I'd be, crazy not to say I wouldn't. So I'm not against finding housing. It's the location that we are talking about. So if we go back to the December presentation for ARPA, there was no mention of the location. Then in April, when our alderperson, Sharice Hersey, mentioned that the location pops up all of a sudden, and she even voted against it on April 10th. She voted for it. I mean, it was on a consent agenda April 17th. I don't know why her vote was changed. I couldn't get her today because I was going to ask her. But she voted against this, and she, was very clear about her position, saying, her challenge with not against, like I said, not against housing, but local location, where we're already dealing with difficult situations in the area that we're in. And the north side, or the north end, which the previous speaker just mentioned, we're sort of warehoused. That's the history of the north end, warehoused. And so African Americans are blacks. And so she talked about, our history for benign neglect, and she wished this particular project could find another location that would provide more amenities of those they want to serve. We have a difficult time already. She mentioned that, Carr could have been doing this 30 years and talking about doing it now. As bringing those services that she had talked about previously for 4 years, a grocery store and all that, and those things had never been produced. And this is a type of kind of project that is done in mostly the black neighborhoods, again, all over the country, warehoused again. So that's kind of what we have, concerns about. Seeing more services where, example, where the Skelton Place on campus, the high-rise, the people who were living there, probably the vulnerable people, were moved to the Haven in Champaign. And so some of those people, are kind of going through some different things, and there's a mix. It's not just, of course, someone medically fragile with a physical disease such as cancer, and we know from the executive summary and information that was being presented, you're going to have other people who may have criminal backgrounds. We're just being transparent. So, you have a 24/7 security. You have a curfew. You have some of these things that sounds like a low security type of correctional rehab facility, because it's not being zoned as a residential area. It's such like a institutionalized facility. So that's, it's the feel of it that it's not, being in a residential area. It's the feel of the facility. Of course not. We want to help, but what's the right fit for providing this housing for those who need it? And so, having been part of the Dr. Ellis, I missed this because I was fighting the sewer issue that's been for 50 years. We just got, a 1.2 million after 50 years of fighting. People have been fighting after being warehoused. And then all of a sudden pop up, we're going to have grocery and all this. So just imagine how we feel. Imagine how we feel. So it's not against the project, of course. We want to do what we can. I'm a minister of the gospel, so of course. It's the location and how all of a sudden it's dropped. And we don't have a say. We don't give notification for feedback. It's after the fact. It's, somebody said a done deal. So we want to be recognized and have respect for the people on the north end, the same respect of if it were in Virgin Commons or Stone Creek, this place would probably be full. So that's the concern. Of course not the project. No. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Anyone else that would like to address the commission in opposition or questions about the project? Sure.
The owners is kind of, identified later, so they're unknowns. And far concerned, I didn't mention this. Dr. Ellis, with things that are going on, there's rumor, with what might happen with our area, the expansion, how it's going to impact Dr. Ellis. People have been getting a lot of calls, with their properties. So there's concern about how this is going to impact us long-term with federal monies being used in one area, and then how it's going to impact our subdivision with all the issues we've had.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the commission? Okay, at this point, I'll give the petitioner, Marty, a chance to respond to any of the comments if you'd like.
I just wanted to I think, more carefully address some of the issues that have come up in terms of very specifically how we will be selecting the 30 individuals for the homes. We will be working with a number of organizations, including the Continuum of Service Providers to the Homeless. There is actually an established referral process within the Continuum. The Continuum includes all the organizations in our community who work with homeless individuals in terms of housing, social services, and so on. So we will be working with them, as well as street outreach. And street outreach works with individuals who are homeless, who are really on the streets, who are not going to the shelters. We will also be working with both hospitals to receive referrals, which is a very common situation where there are individuals who are very, very sick and don't have a place to land when they're ready to discharge because they are homeless, but they cannot go back and live in a shelter. So that is part of the process or the network from which we will be drawing the clients who will live there. In terms of the traffic, you know, I definitely understand those concerns. I think that in general, we're not necessarily going to add a lot of traffic to the area because the vast majority, if not all, of the residents will not be having cars. People who have been chronically homeless do not tend to have vehicles. There will, of course, be staff with vehicles and others, but there's a parking spot. We won't be parking on Carver Drive or in the neighborhood. We will be parking on the property. In terms of the site selection, Marty can probably speak to this better than I, but we were looking at, within Urbana, about 18 different properties. Not all of those properties were for sale. Not all of those properties met the requirements in terms of size and other things that I'm not an expert on. And there were, I believe, offers to purchase some other properties, and they were too large or they were unwilling to sell. And we actually worked with city staff to help identify appropriate properties. And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention, and that we talked about at the meeting on Tuesday, we will have a continual commitment from our 3 organizations to this project for the long term. This is not something that we're just gonna set up and walk away from. Carl is committed to this, the U of I is committed to this, and Healthcare Consumers is committed to this. So it's not something that's going to, you know, fall out of our hands and go into, you know, disrepair or not be managed well. We are, you know, this was a serious commitment that we made when we embarked on this process. So, and we will continue to work with neighborhood residents and the rest of the community and anybody else to try to troubleshoot any issues of concern and to try to mitigate any issues that you know, maybe there are things that we have not talked about. We're at an early stage, but we do feel that our planning has been very focused, intentional. We have also really thought about the location, given that this is the location, how we will structure everything, how we will manage things, and we will do our best, not just for the residents of the village, but also for the neighborhood residents and for the community as well. Thank you.
Thanks. If I could just to address a couple of the comments that I think might be useful to get responses to in particular. There was a question about whether or not the eligibility sort of standards could change in the future. So and this might be a question for staff as well. So the PUD has language that describes this as a facility for medically fragile homeless. Was there the possibility that that could change, or is that language going to be included in the PUD agreement that would govern how this facility is used?
I'd not really considered that. I mean, I suppose it's something that we could consider. You know, we could consider adding some language about that. But I mean, the more specific you get with certain things, then you know you don't want to tie your hands later. So, you know, if there are only 17 people, are you just going to have 13 homes sitting vacant? Does that make sense to legislate that into it? I don't know. That's a question.
Right. Well, I think that's the question of some of the comments that we're getting tonight and that I saw being raised on Tuesday as well. So, yes.
If I may, I don't see that changing. I don't, this is a sad statement to make, but I don't envision that, I don't envision a possibility in this community when we will have no homeless people. The number one cause of homelessness, number one cause is not drugs, alcohol, mental illness, it's the cost of housing. That is the number one cause of homelessness. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be a very long time before anybody who is homeless, or before we stop creating more homeless individuals. But then within that population, there are going to be always people who have been chronically homeless for a number of reasons and who are medically fragile. And in fact, nationwide, there is an increasing percentage of homeless individuals who are seniors in their 70s and 80s who become homeless after a spouse dies or something like that happens. I just don't envision a possibility when we would change our mission and our focus and our purpose here. And the other thing is that these homes have been designed very much with that in mind, as almost as a model for aging in place, actually, because, you know, that's basically what's going to be happening with this population. I know you're asking about it more from a planning perspective, but from a programmatic perspective, I just don't see that changing.
You have a question?
In the site selection process, and I think you said Marty would be, were any other sites at any stage in the process made public?
No. No. I mean, we had a list from the city of potential locations, 18 to 19 locations. We vetted each location for constructionability, compatibility with the surrounding areas, and we made an offer on another project, which was unattainable. And this site really came down to an ideal location as it relates to the the services to the site, the affordability, and it didn't require any demolition of existing homes or other structures.
Right. My question was pretty specific, and that is simply none of the, it never reached a stage where there was any public discussion of alternative sites.
No.
And that was going to be my follow-on question, was if you could articulate a little bit about why this particular site makes sense for this particular facility. Is there anything else you'd add beyond what you just described?
You know, we have utilities to the site, so it wasn't a complete undeveloped site surrounding it. Again, it's zoned properly from the get-go. We weren't going to, have to take the process of rezoning. We feel, in looking at other similar projects across the country, it was very compatible in the neighborhood setting. Again, we've got bus service, and the surrounding amenities really worked well for this project. Okay. I think we've taken the neighborhood into account and provided the safeguards and the amenities that'll also be a benefit to the surrounding neighborhood.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, follow-up? Mr. Hopkins? Yep. All right, thank you.
More. Sorry. Do we have anybody here from the design team?
We do.
So can we ask them to?
Yes.
Chad Osterborough with Fair Graham Engineering, civil engineer.
Brian Kessler with Architectural Expressions. I'm one of two architects working on the project. Reef Stack Reed is the other.
Who?
Reef Stack Reed.
Okay. So as we said early on, this is the preliminary. You got to come back for the final. And at the final, it's on. Oh. It's the human that's the problem. So there's a level of questions, but for the preliminary, and then there's sort of feedback that's more pertinent to the later. And the part of the difficulty with some of this is at some point we're going to get into weeds that other people, most other people are not going to want to deal with. But I'll try. So from the perspective of the design team, you're being assigned only the initial phase and have no responsibility for the rest of tract 1 or tract 2?
Well, if you're referring to the remainder tract to the north, I mean, it still has all access to all the utilities.
Right, that's not the question I asked. The question I asked is, in your design brief, you are at the moment only dealing with the initial phase as described in this. Is that the case?
Yeah, we're only designing for the Hope Village development.
Right, okay.
Development to the north, there are no plans for that. You know, we're making sure we're not painting ourselves into a corner.
Well, okay, that's not clear to me, okay? And that's sort of the issue. So in a general perspective, the general layout maybe implies that phase 2, which might include a connection to Dory Mills Drive, at least this is included in some of our information. There's track 2 and a trapped southeast corner in the current layout and design. And there's a dead end of Dory Mills. So we've captured a parcel, or actually 2 parcels at the moment, legally 2 parcels, with no plans and no obvious consideration of what comes next, or why, or for what range of possibilities those parcels have been trapped. And if I understand this correctly, tract 2 will still be owned by Carl.
I think to clarify, everything south of the north fence line will all be one parcel.
Okay, so it'll be reparceled.
All of that, right.
It'll become one parcel, and you are responsible for all of that parcel.
Right.
Okay. And why, so again, I apologize for asking the questions, but this is what matters. Why is the fence line the shape it is on the north, and why is that the parcel pattern?
Well, that's in the interest of Carl and making sure that we don't, you know, eat up unnecessary land to the north. You know, that land to the north will become its own separate tract. And there, like I said, there's no plans for that right now. but
So you made this unusual shape of a parcel because it happened to fit the layout and you wanted to reserve as much land for something else as possible?
How would you prefer to see the line drawn? If we drew
Well,
it straight with that?
The point is, I would expect it to either follow some infrastructure issue, and the infrastructure coming through the site that's identified, is that agricultural drainage or is that something else? Because you don't say on your drawing. You've got an infrastructure right-of-way drawn, but not labeled.
everything on here is, on this site is private. I think for the record, we have since drawn that line straight across now. It just made more sense to make it due east and west, the north line due east and west. But
Okay,
this is, we picked that line because that's all we needed for this development. I mean, I don't know how else to answer that.
We
Okay.
simply have
So-
a parcel that's bigger than what we need for the development. we're
okay,
trying
but
to
then
build.
you trapped the southeast corner and didn't use it.
It's not trapped. It's part of the parcel that we're working on right now. It may be programmed space for community gardens or some other amenity to the village.
Okay, so why not make the link to Dory Mills Drive now and spread the traffic, foot and otherwise, out on 2 streets instead of 1?
So we don't intend to extend Dory Mills through this development because we want to limit the traffic. We don't want Federal Drive connecting to Dory Mills in any way, shape, or form.
I wasn't talking about connecting Federal Drive to Dory Mills. I'm talking about connecting your parking lot to Dory Mills now, which you even identify as a possibility for Phase 2, whatever Phase 2 is, but Phase 2 hasn't been talked about. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there are 2 kinds of issues here from my point of view. One is what some of the opposition has been talking about, which is why us? And the second is, why done in this particular way? It seems to focus all of it on one of our little residential streets of single-family homes that we actually own, and not think about the access. So for an example, construction access ought to come from Federal Drive. Because you own the whole parcel, you could come from Federal Drive for construction and not have all of that going up Carter.
Yeah,
For the deliveries and other things, you could actually think about ahead of time how access from Federal Drive for servicing an operation of 30 residents, at least 5 staff, because we've been told there can be security, which is presumably 24 hours. We're hearing it's going to be staffed 24 hours with something other than security. The caseworkers have 5 to 6 individuals per caseworker. That's 5 caseworkers coming and going, maybe not every day, but presumably frequently. There's going to be a food bus going up Carver Drive that could actually come down Federal.
So
I think there are other ways to use the property and site you have to mitigate the implications of why us. And I think you haven't. So that's my main concern about the preliminary.
we want to be conscious of the demographic that we're serving here too. We don't want to force these residents to have to travel to a bus station up Federal Drive all the way around.
I didn't say they have to go to a bus station for the live. I talked about concrete trucks for construction and access for service vehicles.
And there's nothing in this preliminary site plan that suggests that we're gonna focus our construction traffic on Carver Drive. I think that's something, if we need to come off Federal, I think absolutely folks would be open to that. And I think that's a great suggestion. As far as extending Federal Drive to the site, I mean, there's an issue of economy here too. We're working with, limited funds, and that's a major, major cost item.
Okay. Somebody owns that parcel. We know how roads get extended. In any case, I think I've sort of made my point.
I feel like we're kind of at a disadvantage because we haven't seen the materials that were provided on Tuesday, but the other comment that we're hearing is, concerns about the feel of the development, which I take to mean, I have a house on Carver Drive or I have a house on Dory Miller and I'm looking down at this development. What does it look like? What is the impact, the presence of this on the neighborhood? Is there any insights that you could provide at this point? I know that you're in the preliminary stages, but it seems like there were some renderings. Anything that you can say to address those concerns?
We've done our best to take a step back from the rest of the neighborhood to the south. We didn't want to push our development too far in that direction, just to create a little bit of a buffer to make everything feel a little bit more comfortable between residents to the south and our development to the north. We are not quite to landscaping stages here, but we anticipate that there would be very nice landscaping between the community building and the neighborhood to the south. We have a retention pond that's in the southwest corner. We've tried to create a nice buffer. In terms of the aesthetic of the community center and the homes, I'm partial because I'm one of the architects, of course, but I think they're both very nicely designed. They have a residential feel to them. We're using, at least right now, we're proposing to use asphalt shingles, just like most typical homes in the area, as well as a composite siding product. So all the materials are a little bit of an upgrade from normal sort of economy building that we're seeing in some other subdivisions. Carl and the U of I have both been really specific about wanting quality, and we're doing our best to deliver that. Although it has a residential feel in terms of the material and roof slopes and massing and things like that, it also has a little bit of a more modern edge. So I think residents looking at the development can be proud of the architecture and the character, and I really think it will blend into the surrounding neighborhood very well. And I think it's, again, something that the community can be proud of. And I don't know that this was brought up previously, and it's a little bit outside my purview, but I believe the community center will be available at least sometimes to residents for events and things like that. So it's not only serving those 30 residents, but it's meant to be an amenity for the neighborhood at large.
So detention ponds or retention ponds, those can be nice to look at. Sometimes they can also be eyesores. Is the location of that because of topography? Is that the way water is draining across the site, or is that just, again?
There's one of the items that we were sort of tasked with is creating homes that were sustainable. We had net zero as a target. At one point, we've come off of that a little bit just to sort of balance costs. One of the theories with the retention pond was to cool winds as they blow over the water. All the homes are oriented such that we have low windows on the southwest, and clear story windows on the north, so that we can take advantage of natural winds to help cool the homes without using air conditioning. Having the detention or retention pond at the southwest corner was a thought toward cooling those breezes.
There still will be air conditioning in these buildings.
There will.
The detention pond location is actually kind of intriguing for several reasons. But presumably, it's got to meet our detention regulations.
Well, it has to.
Yes. And a related question becomes which definition of parcel it has to serve. And at the moment, it's actually one of the high points of the site, which is a little unusual for placing a detention basin. It's also outside the fence, and it probably in the neighborhood that it's in is going to have to be fenced, though that's not clear. And it also relates to the question about what that infrastructure identified as, whether it's agricultural drainage and whether the agricultural drainage has to be maintained because the parcel to the northwest is still in ag. And apparently we don't know what that is. It's just on the map and unlabeled. But yeah, I think the detention pond location is also should be thought of as an open question.
Yeah, this will be more of an urban storm sewer collection system. It will collect everything on the south parcel. That includes, I don't know where we landed, 6-7 acres. Everything will drain into that basin, and we will be required to provide stormwater calculations to engineering for them to approve.
The everything is the question I have, whether it includes the north parcel or whether it includes the southeast, which I think it has to by legal definition if it's going to become one parcel.
Yeah. It includes
and
everything in
the
the
location of
southeast.
it is kind of odd because it's not at a low point of the site, which means we're not going to be doing surface or green swale drainage unless you've got some really clever ideas that are not obvious from the site plan at this point. Anyway, okay.
Can I jump in to give a little sort of education on sort of preliminary versus final development plans? I mean, I've been here since 2014. I think this is the first one I've seen come in that weren't sort of at the same time. So so I'm learning a bit as we're doing it. But so for the preliminary plans, it's a very low level of required information. So I'll just go through this stuff. So when you apply for a preliminary development plan, you need to, excuse me, essentially list all the owners and all the consultants and things that'll be working on the project, a general location map, a site inventory, so like existing conditions showing site assets and constraints, floodplains, wetlands, soils, wooded areas, existing infrastructure and easements, existing buildings and public lands. And then a conceptual site plan, which we have, showing adjacent parcels, proposed land uses, building locations, existing and proposed streets, sidewalks, and multi-use paths, buffers between different land uses. And that's it. It says any other information deemed necessary by the Secretary of the Plan Commission. That's me. I didn't deem any other information necessary. So that's a very basic level. Now, when you get into the final plan, it gets a lot more detailed. So again, a general location map, but then a specific site plan with location of proposed structures and existing structures that will remain, with gross height and floor area for each structure, the circulation system showing pedestrian, bicycle, and motor vehicle movement, a landscape plan the location of any open spaces, a preliminary stormwater plan, a preliminary utilities plan, the location of street and pedestrian lighting, including lamp intensity and height, so that's kind of detailed. Conceptual elevations, so that's where those come in. Design location of any signs, more details about signs. A development program that provides general information about the development, including desired residential and commercial tenants, housing price targets, estimated construction costs, any other information that conveys that purpose and intent of the development, a development schedule, and then that catch-all, any other information deemed necessary by the Secretary of the Plan Commission. So I think, you know, the preliminary is very basic. The final is a lot more detailed. So I just wanted to clarify all that.
Okay, thanks for clarification.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask one more time if there's anyone in the public that wishes to address the commission. Last chance. All right, so we'll declare the public input portion closed and now go into a discussion and possibly entertain motions to vote. So is there any discussion on the proposal? And before we make a motion, can I ask for a clarification, Kevin, because you mentioned this second condition about the sidewalks, and when I'm looking
Yes.
at the PUD recommended design features, it seems to address that. So I'm wondering if that is necessary.
It's probably not necessary.
Okay.
It's just something that I noticed, but I was probably getting into more detail than necessary for the preliminary.
The
So
second,
that would be in the final.
Yes.
yeah, or depending on if they address it adequately and complying with these design features in the ordinance here, which we would know by the final. Okay. So, any discussion? Are we ready to make a motion?
I don't know that I want to start with a motion. And I'll try not to start with emotion either. I think the position we're in, from my point of view, is this is something that should be done. We are again in the position of not doing it in my backyard. We're doing it in somebody else's backyard. And I think we could do a significantly better job, given this site, of mitigating the effects for the people in whose backyards it is. And for that reason, I'm trying to imagine a motion. Well, let me remind people of another aspect here. This is the preliminary, as we've been talking about. We make a recommendation that goes to council. Council then acts on the preliminary. And I don't know when that might occur. The council meeting on July 3rd, or is that council?
That one's going to be canceled.
Is going to be canceled?
Yes,
That's what
so
I
they will
predicted.
meet on the 17th would be the first date this could go.
Okay. So the preliminary goes to the council on the 17th. The final, though it's doubtful in my mind that it could be developed that fast, given what I think we're starting with, could not come before the Plan Commission until the I suppose the 21st or whatever that Thursday is.
Well, I don't think it could come that early. We'd need to receive an application.
Right, that's what
So
I mean, so the final approval, a building permit for this is 2 or 3 months away at least. Right? So I'm also considering in how I think this through, the timeline. I mean, I think in the News Gazette, it was predicting this would be in place by December. I don't think people have got the real world straight here.
Well, so there should be some clarification on that. So the initial plan, which I've determined that they could do without requiring a planned unit development, is build the community center, because that would be allowed by right under zoning as a charitable institution. They could build that, and their intent is also to build a model home. And they could do all of that by right. Of course, it's running a risk of, well, if the PUD doesn't get approved, then
And you think that's a good idea?
it's not my determination to decide if that's a good idea. It's an option.
Okay, I'm even more confused than I was.
So when the News Gazette said there was, ground would be broken in July and things would be done by December, that's not the entire village. It would be the community center plus a model home. That's it.
But that would include
But
infrastructure
because-
to access those things or not?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Because somebody has said they could get a building permit to do that?
Yes, they could do it. The use, I've determined the use is allowed by right under zoning.
When you say mobile home, you mean all the 30 little house will be mobile home plus
No,
a community center?
No, model home. So just one of the tiny homes just built there, nobody living there, just showing here's what all of these homes are going to look like.
Okay.
Wouldn't that potentially lock into place a site plan before the site plan is approved?
It would certainly lock into place where the community center and where that first home is going to be.
Without even approval of the preliminary plan?
Potentially.
And when you're saying potentially, I don't get the idea here. You're saying that they could do that by right, and even though they've applied for a PUD, that the city would grant that building permit?
Yes. I mean, if you want to do something by right, we can't stand in the way.
Okay, well, I think there's the technicality of what could possibly happen, and then there's the perception of that by some of the people that have been making comments, raising concerns that this seems to be a done deal, so on and so on, that doesn't really help the situation. That's a concern I have. And I was confused in the news by reading the News Gazette article as well, exactly what that meant, but that clarifies things.
So, okay, let me try, because I think we need to do something. I'm not going to try to word it as a resolution, as a motion yet, but there are 3 parts to this. One is to recommend approval of a preliminary application, and that because of timeline issues, which I think are relevant. Conditions on that no construction on the site under the proposal for a PUD may occur before approval of the final PUD application. The parking waiver that's already in there, and that wasn't one of my three. I just now remembered it. And the third is that the final application is not significantly constrained by the preliminary site plan. And the final application will take significant steps to mitigate the impacts on the neighborhood to the south.
Can I offer an alternative?
Okay?
Well, knowing that this can't go to committee of the whole until the 17th, and that there can be another plan commission meeting on July 6th, if the plan commission wanted to describe the types of things that you might like to see to make the site plan better, then that would give them some time to come back with a revised preliminary plan for your review on July 6th.
I mean, I have two reactions. One is, I'm not planning to be here on July 6th.
Fair enough.
Which may be to their benefit, so they may like that idea. The other is, I don't think that the kinds of things I have in mind can be figured out that fast. What I'm trying to do is say that if we treat this as very much preliminary and say, okay, we're gonna make it work somehow in this site despite its problems. So let's not delay the timeline. But then let's acknowledge that we're going to take some time and do something to mitigate the implications. And that's not going to happen between now and July 6th.
Can I add something? So the implications or the impact to be mitigated, I don't think necessarily comes from the four of us. I think it comes from the neighbors, the people who live adjacent to the site. And it sounds like they feel like it was a rushed process to meet with them on Tuesday and for them to have been able to give, significant feedback. It sounds like there was some discussion about another meeting being held between the applicant and adjacent property owners, the community. I think that's something that I'd like to see as part of the condition. So it's not just us describing what we think, although we might have ideas, what should be done to mitigate some of these impacts. I think there should be attempts made to engage with the surrounding community, the surrounding neighbors, to address their concerns specifically. So I would add that to your condition.
And I agree with that, and I think for some of our feedback anyway, we can do it through staff. Because we've already gone beyond the limit of what I've said here, but there's more to say. That can go through staff. So now,
You want to try a motion with that?
well, Kevin was taking notes, so I'm hoping he can help me here. Or we could go to the recording, I suppose, but.
Well,
I'm
first, can I
typically
ask?
very bad at taking notes. They're usually for my own self, but I think Marcus is pretty good.
Kevin, there was not a condition about the parking waiver. That seemed to be something that was just part of the PUD application, so we don't need to add a condition about that.
Correct, yeah, I checked into that very thing earlier, because it's been a
okay.
while since we've done a PUD. Waivers don't have to go in as a condition.
So we're back to 4 items. Be with community, neighborhood. Okay, so, if we're going to this trouble, and nobody else has said anything, I'm assuming that this is worth putting forth as a motion. Okay, I move that we send plan case number 2476 PUD 23 to the city council with a recommendation of approval with the following conditions. No construction can occur on the applied for site until approval of the final PUD. The final is not constrained by the preliminary site plan, and major steps to mitigate impacts on the neighborhood will be developed in the final site plan. And an additional meeting with neighborhood residents will be conducted.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Hopkins. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Ms. McFarland. Any further discussion? All right, could we have a roll call, please?
Got too many sheets around here. There it is. It's hiding under my notes. Okay. Mr. Allred,
Yes.
Ms. McFarland,
Yes.
Ms. Yu,
Yes.
and Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Okay, that passes, and to reiterate, it sounds like that will go to council on July 17th.
That's correct.
Okay, is there any new business?
There is none.
All right. Audience participation. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission for 4 minutes uninterrupted on a topic of your choice? If so, please come forward and sign in. So it doesn't have to be about this proposal. All right. Doesn't seem like we have any takers. Do we have a staff report?
We do not.
And no study session, in which case we are adjourned at 8:49. Thanks, everyone.